song. But you also have what's interesting in Nashville is you'll have just different like alternative country artists who happen to be in town that same week, and they'll get together and write. So I think that's almost like on a cultural level, like that's still happening in Nashville, sort of underground co-writing sessions for artists that just happen to be in the same, industry town at the same time. I do know that happens a lot, which is awesome. And I think especially like during this past year with the pandemic and everything, it's been more common for like virtual collaborations, for sure, for mostly for bigger artists, but musically speaking, like Nashville's super diverse.
Yeah.
Way more diverse than people think.
Yeah. And it's a great town to be in for that, because like what I find is that maybe I'm not doing co-writing or anything, but I'm seeing the, the best of the best in one era. It's like what I thought about when I lived in New York City, like you're seeing the best of food. Like, so it's like that, what the ideals of capitalism maybe is that it is creating competition. And I want to be better as a songwriter and a performer. Like we were talking about Townes Van Sant earlier, and like I remember reading like Guy Clark's biography and that idealization of like, the songwriting thing that you're doing cocaine all night, and then at 5 o'clock in the morning you start writing the song, and there's an actual label that's behind that. But even still thinking then, like Steve Earle and Chris Christopherson, there was a machine behind that. Like they got paid for it, and they had maybe a bit more freedom in what they were able to write about maybe back then. I don't know if you see that today, but unfortunately, like that's the money-making process of like, we make fun of the country music machine here all the time. It's like, all right, got to put the four-wheeler reference in there and talking about my girlfriend on the beach, on the lake and things like that, and my Coors in my hand.
Well, and I think that now, for the realm of like outlaw country that Willie Nelson would be wrapped up in, Chris Christopherson would dabble in. I don't know if people would consider him like,
oh yeah, he's complete, the outlaw. Yeah. He is the outlaw. Yeah.
But for that realm, it also gets glorified. Like they were iconic when they first came out, when they were rebels, like for a country music industry, with holding up Hank Williams on a pedestal. Those guys were, they were fighting as well to get their songs heard and listened to. And there was tons of clash between, Nashville and Texas, basically, like those sounds. And I would kind of argue like it is still, that bias holds today. Like you'll still hear Texas artists, just they have a bitter taste in their mouth when they talk about Nashville, because it's become sort of like a metaphor for selling out on some level, especially for country music. And that I think just speaks to sort of like not to get all like heavy on this, but like the corporatization of country music. Like, they really are just following the dollar now. And most of the music that's getting radio play just feels like contentless, like it has nothing in it, substanceless.
Yeah. It's really, it's kind of just, Nashville is definitely one of those few places where you can kind of come and do a lot of different things. It depends upon your preference. Do you want to be a songwriter? Our main thing with Nashville that we just didn't realize until we got here is logistical, because it's just located to so many markets to tour out of. Right. And it's not too cold. Like Detroit maybe could be a great place, but it gets really, really cold. And it would just be hell to deal with in terms of logistics at certain times of the year. Texas, again, like me coming from Texas, East Texas, and wanting to go back to Austin and live in Austin, but then you realize Austin is a little tiny island of like, you can be this alternative rock band, but then you're surrounded every single way by 8 hours of places that you can't play, basically, except for about 3 or 4 places: Dallas, Houston, San Antonio. So it just, but if you are a songwriter, that doesn't really matter, especially now, like with like now the silver lining, hopefully, of COVID, like with the Zoom, rise of Zoom and things like that, you can do these online writing sessions, or you can reach, if you're just interested in doing YouTube videos, you can reach people anywhere you want to. Coulter Wall was up by himself in what's it, Sahatchee, I'm not saying that right, but in Canada, all by himself on a ranch, and was just making YouTube videos, and he was able to get through
Going
that.
through that.
So, but I mean, it just, long answer short, it kind of just depends on what you want to do here. If you want to find that in Nashville, you definitely can.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of diversity here. And ultimately, you have a city, like what I would say, what makes Nashville so different from New York City or Los Angeles is that because Nashville isn't as big as those cities yet, it is growing rapidly, but because it's not that big yet, you still find most musicians here are what I would call earnest. Like they really do want to talk about a song. They really do want to have a beer with you and dissect what makes a certain song so great. And it's not ironic or sarcastic. It's real. And that is very gratifying.
And they're not spending 70 to 80 hours like waiting
Working.
tables just to get rent. So they actually have the headspace.
Yeah.
And that's like, I mean, there's like in Berlin, like where we met, whole nother story there, but like you have that, it's not an expensive place to live. You're surrounded by a lot of bohemian artistic people.
I don't know what it's like now. I think the prices are rising. I'm pretty
sure. I'm
sure.
sure. Probably. It happens to every town, but when we were there 4 or 5 years ago, there was that social artistic space that was possible.
Low cost of living.
Yeah.
And high quality of life. So, you know, you could experiment as an artist and not risk it all.
Yeah.
Right. But there seems in I guess the classic Nashville songwriters, there's so much of a focus on, I guess, the form of the song and of the writing. There's this sort of classic form that's developed in different ways. And I'm sort of wondering about that. And also what I'm learning recently is that Nashville and the music around it is quite diverse. I mean, it usually has something to do with country, but it's not strictly country music.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking of artists in the past couple years that are sort of based. We all say we're based in Nashville, but you know that can differ depending on the artist. But Nashville artists who have risen with sort of like a country background. So like Sierra Farrell has done really well for herself, and she's not necessarily traditional. I think her voice is amazing. She's like, what's her name? This is awful. Plane crash. Why can't I think of her name?
Patsy Cline?
Patsy Cline.
Okay.
Sorry. Patsy Cline. She's got like a Patsy Cline voice, but her country is a little bit more alternative. Jamie Wyatt is another female artist who's like traditional, but once again, like her content's pushing the boundaries of her songs. And I think that just speaks to the future of country, which is actually like quite right.
Yeah. And I think that may go back to my thing of like what the difference with rock music and country music, you have a little bit more, it's kind of bubbling up to the surface, whereas I don't think rock is stuck or anything. It's just things haven't really bubbled to the surface of like, you know, the rock radios have really moved past new metal. Like nothing against new metal, like it's fine in its context if you're really bored in a cornfield in Iowa, I suppose. God, we always knock Iowa in our interviews.
Iowa's fine. It's not going anywhere.
Yeah, every genre of music has its place. It's fun. Like I don't want to listen to a depressing folk song in a nightclub where I'm trying to dance and feel free. Like so, but I don't want to listen to crazy weird techno music in a coffee shop either. So I'm trying to like sit.
Unless you're in Berlin.
Unless you're in Berlin, then you could find that. I always thought that was really funny when I was in Ukraine, and I would just be like in a coffee shop sometimes, and there would be like the little techno dance lights going off.
Right, yeah. Like I know those well.
Techno lights, yeah. And I was like, I don't know if this fits together right now.
I can't really relax.
Yeah, I can't really relax. I really just want to do some EDM and just like go crazy.
I think most clubs there and in a lot of southern Europe, they sort of double as, you know, the nightclub and the coffee shop by day.
That is true. I forgot that. Yes, they do.
Yeah.
They do.
I kind of love that too.
Yeah, that's again perks. You know, you can stay there the whole day.
Efficient.
Like right.
But I'm wondering also since you mentioned the differences in sound, and obviously the fact that certain sounds work best in certain situations. I'm wondering about the evolution of your sound, because obviously the single, your last single, the one that we heard and that we reviewed, it has that country but also hard rocking sort of AC/DC-ish feel to it. And it is, and correct me if I'm wrong, it is a bit of a transition from your early EPs that I heard. Would that be right?
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Absolutely. When we first began as a band, we were both playing acoustic guitars. I had like a wooden plank board that had a tambourine nailed to it that I would stomp on. And it definitely transformed from more folksy acoustic to electric. And that's one of the ways we actually got to our band title, Volk. We were sort of in our minds combining the word voltage, like electricity, with folk music. So we were like Volk.
Because in Berlin, it started out as a necessity of like, I just couldn't find other people to play with. So I was like, all right, I just have to play with an acoustic guitar and write these folk songs.
And playing smaller cafes and smaller spaces, and being able to sort of, we always kind of view that as like, we were practicing our songwriting a little more. Like experimenting with what works and what people were responding to. And then once we got that under our belt a little more, for other various reasons, we started playing louder.
And the first EP, Boutique Western Swing Composition, is that like kind of right out the gate of like, we had added
middle waters
drums, and I was kind of figuring out my setup as a duo, but like trying to replicate more of a bass underneath this tone in my guitar, which I hadn't really actually figured out. I always think about that's hilarious. Like, I didn't really understand when we were recording that in the studio, like, well, why are you setting up that bass amp? And now that's like second nature to me now. And so Boutique Western Swing Compositions was really those songs that we wanted to be like, we are songwriters, and that's our main emphasis. And where Average American Band is, we will rock the fuck out more than anybody else in this room. And then what we're excited about now with the new album that will come out in May is like, this is everything. Like, this is the Volk experience, where there's going back to the ups and downs, and like, you know, do like an actual kind of like a feeling of a story, which we're excited about.
Right.
And Welcome to Nashville is very just much like us being smartasses and kind of giving the middle finger to a couple of different people.
It's a cheeky song for sure.
Yeah,
right.
Which is
I'm
very much
wondering about what's the story with the intro, and I guess, you know, the manager that is sort of sending you out into the world to to cash in. I'm wondering about that.
Sure. That is our actual label head. He's head of Romanus Records, and he's also a good friend of ours. We've been working with him for years, and we recorded this song, that whole album, in Indianapolis, which is about 4 hours north from here in Indiana. And he lives in Indianapolis, so he had stopped by the studio the day we were putting vocals down, I think. And I just thought it would be such a cool, unique way to start off a song that just really like grabs the listener, and like it's honestly shocking on purpose. It's funny because when we have it played on the radio here, one of our favorite radio hosts, he always warns everybody before it starts so that no one, you know, freaks out in their car while they're listening. But it was sort of just like a spontaneous challenge. I was like, hey, we want you to pretend to be this dick, like just lay it on, you know, like be the asshole everyone thinks of when they think of you know, a shallow record executive. And he nailed it. I mean, he basically wrote that down in like 5 minutes and was just like, okay, let's do this. I think like my only other little side note would be like, I am a theater major, so I come from a background of you know, the dramatic arts, so it's sort of easy to be like, let's do this, let's amp this up.
And Chris Banta, he's a huge fan of wrestling, like WWE. Like, he has subscriptions to those like those channels and things like that, and we watch like wrestling shows from the 80s. So he's very well trained, and like we like just imagine you're one of those managers from the old wrestling days, like Bobby the Brain Heenan or something like that, and just go off, or like, and also like, you know, we're gonna put you in this cowboy hat thing and like get like the boss hog thing going from Dukes of Hazzards, and just, you know, just go full tilt. And like I like that the director of the music video actually caught on to that almost, Patrick Pearson, like he made Banta's face kind of appear more red, and I can't remember the name of the one wrestling manager who actually had like a red face because he was always yelling so much. And so like I was like, oh, that's a cute little nod to that, because yeah, that was kind of his inspiration. And he just has he's in a really cool rock duo called Brother Oh Brother as well, and he yells a lot. So he's just very well trained for that.
That's brilliant. And since you mentioned rock duos, I guess I want to ask you this as well, especially in live setting. And you mentioned, you know, trying to get something of a something to occupy that segment that would usually be occupied by a bass guitar. How is it playing live, and what are the challenges, and how are people responding to this? Since obviously in you know, recent years, rock duos are more prevalent than they were in the past. Prevalent.
Yeah, I think it's funny because, you know, historically speaking, like if we look back at bands like I don't know if you're familiar with like the Gories, who are from Detroit.
Right. Yeah.
They weren't a duo, but their dynamics were very similar, and inspirational, you know, to Jack White and the White Stripes, considering they didn't have a bassist, and their drummer was very bare bones, is very bare bones. They're still around. But I think, you know, the hills that they had to climb artistically, in terms of people being like, where's your bass?
Or just visually.
Constantly, or
Yeah.
even visually, you know,
Yeah.
we have less of those hills to climb because of them. So, you know, inevitably we're indebted to the White Stripes. And I mean, like, you know, it's amazing that we have more duos nowadays that are big, that are playing Glastonbury, you know. That's awesome. Well, we never knock down duos. And I think that like for us, we didn't come in trying to be a duo, which is also super interesting. I think most duos
No
don't,
band
actually.
ever does intend to be a duo. It's like, oh, the bassist quit, oh, the guitar player quit.
Yeah, so it really wasn't this like cool artistic choice, you know, like, oh, just two people, but it sort of arose out of necessity. And then we, you know, like Jack White speaks of, or has spoken of all the time, we enjoy the challenge, sort of rising to the occasion. Like, how do we fill out this sound and use it to our advantage, especially when it comes to the power of rock, which I think, you know, not to harken back to always to the White Stripes, but like they were the perfect example of like, there's actually quite a quite amount of power you can attain from stripping down, you know, and getting to the basics of what you really need. And we get that compliment all the time playing live. Like, you guys sounded like a 4-person band. Wow, that's just a huge sound for 2 people.
Yeah.
Like, it's one of the first things people say.
And it's some bit of like technology and like setup, but there's also, like, as Ellie was like, it's composition. Like, how do you take those moments? I call them like those like drop-offs, because when you drop off suddenly, it makes the next part way bigger than you would think. And just how do we, like, all right, if I am going to go up on the higher strings, Elliot's going to go down on the toms and things like that to fill those spaces. And it's just realizing, seeing sound is not this, or like, I always think of a sound as like a painting. Like, you know, you have your treble, you have your mids, you have your bass, and like those compositions, like, how do you fill those spaces? And, you know, maybe a problem that a lot of duos probably, and I definitely did this at first, of like, when you are trying to just fill sound, you take all of either treble or mid or bass and just throw it all over, and then just like wall of sound, and
Total
like figuring out those and figuring out those dynamics to let everything breathe through.
And you know, I think some of it can be intentional. Like, we have plenty of friends in duos that are not, I wouldn't call them like noise bands, so to speak, but they are intentionally, like, you know, laying it on heavy, whether that's like with their drumming and whatnot. I think that for like powerful rock songs, like Royal Blood's a great example of this. Phenomenal drummer. He pulls back when he has to. It's very clear, you know, and he hits his fills when he needs to, and that's, you know, that's for the good of the song, you know, the power of the song. And I think, you know, those are the songs we're referencing. I just I hate, like, you know, like obviously there are like those duos that are experimenting musically, you know, and they don't really care if the song's catchy or whatever, but that is something we try to strive for, is a song that's just a good song on its own, you know, despite all of our weirdness, despite all the gimmicks, despite all the lights and the, you know, and whatnot, that it's actually just a good song. Hopefully, you know, at the end of the day.
Yeah, and it's just understanding good song dynamics and like talking about like balls to the wall, like Friendship Commanders, like they just can go balls to the wall, but it works so well because Buick's singing with her beautiful voice, those like heart-wrenching lyrics.
It's a local Nashville band.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
They were on the Alt 77.
Awesome.
And it kind of just, you know, just for me, like with the guitar stuff and the bass stuff, it was like letting my influences shine through. Like I wanted to be able to have at the same time either like a Angus Young tone or a Pete Anderson from Dwight Yoakam's band tone at the same time while filling out the bass. And I didn't really care so much about the bass because I'm not a bass player, but I just needed something doing a thud behind me. And I prefer it live as opposed to recording, just because I feel like it's easier to trick people live because it's just a simple matter of mixing the bass amp with the guitar amp to where there's enough treble coming through and mids from the guitar that you perceive the pitch, but there's enough boom, boom, boom coming from the bass that it still moves you. Like a friend of mine, a sound expert, says like bass makes people move, treble makes people listen, like that. And that's all I'm trying to think about when composing a guitar lick. So yeah.
Brilliant. And I'm actually wondering about Welcome to Cashville, and obviously it has that great outro to it. I'm wondering how that works live. That's part of the question, and also wondering when you do play live. Obviously, everyone's kind of had a break recently, but how does that work? And what sort of bands do you usually get paired up with? And is the, you know, fitting into a certain scene more important when playing live, or is that not really you know, consideration around that area?
So wait, I got lost.
So Welcome to Cashville. Like when do we?
Sorry,
play
I was a bit of a
the outro. So the outro is my favorite part because that's the part where you don't have to care anymore. Like we did our job. I played the little cool. I actually maybe performed the lick that I wanted to midway through the song, and that's just everything. Like all the pedals are turned on, all the pogs, so it's just smashing on the guitar. And most of the time live, I'm usually so out of tune that it's not even, or it's a wreck, and like Elliot's crashing on her drums. And that's kind of like why we chose or Patrick Pearson wanted to get that fireworks name, because that's the part that just goes
for the music video.
Just everything's insane. Like usually I've thrown my hat and glasses off. I hope my glasses haven't broken.
It's the release.
It's the release.
The cathartic release.
And it's like that outro. It's just octave chord. Or you don't call it a chord, it's octaves. And I'm just like going up and down the guitar and I'm hitting the whammy pedal, and that's all it is for me. Like I love that part because it's just like I don't care anymore what happens.
It's usually at the end of our sets. It's a very fun song to close with, almost perfect, if you will, especially if we've played like the whole gamut, you know, if we've played the country stuff, our softer stuff, like we will play it all in one night, and it's very fun to just, you know, sort of throw it all in the air and end with that song. And I mean, that being said, like I think you can speak to like all the different kinds of artists we play with, because we pretty much play with them all.
yeah I mean, like as you said, like maybe we're not in a certain scene here, probably because we're such chameleons, or I don't want to say chameleon because that has like a bad connotation, but like we're such genre bending that we have the opportunity of like, we can play one night with a country band, or we can play one night with a hard rock band, or a heavy metal band,
We've opened for Charlie Crockett.
Yeah.
And we've opened for Diarrhea Planet.
Yeah. So like complete different spheres of
entirely different forms of fans. However, there is overlap. There is absolute overlap, you know, going back to good songs. People just like good songs.
And if we do our job right, and like kind of like we'll look when we're building a set, like, you know, lead people into it and let it be emotional journey of like, yeah, I'm going to sit up here and start the set playing sad songs and waltzes by myself on the guitar, and then it kind of starts picking up slowly, and then by the end of it, and that's actually what I love to do. I don't want to sit and just be barraged by sound for 2 or 3 hours by the same thing, or I don't want to, you know, have to listen to an 8-minute folk song either for 3 hours. So it's good to change it up. Like,
we get that. We get total a huge diverse amount of artists we get to play with, and honestly, that's how we like it, you know. Because then we get to enjoy all kinds of different music, and we definitely have a catalog of songs that's malleable, you know, that we can change up depending on the night.
And those bands really influence us. Like sometimes we'll be playing a series of shows with one band and they will influence Elliot to write a song in that style, or we're just really into one certain album and then just like, oh gosh, I want to write that song. And
just thinking of all the different bands that, you know, you listen to on the road, and we're huge collectors of CDs with the bands. You know, we always grab a CD or two of whoever we play with, just because you've got 8 hours on the road, you might as well, you know, dig into your friend's music. And just thinking of like, there's a great duo out of Cincinnati called Lung. She plays the girl plays a electric cello, and then it's Daisy playing the drums, and it's just and she sings too, and it's a very unique mix, but their songs are so good. So, you know, we listen to something like that, and then we play with like, you know, traditional country quartet from like Texas, like Mayu and Broussard, a great band out of Austin, which is a little bit more like almost like psychedelic, like swampy country. Like they've got a really unique sound. They're singers from Louisiana originally, but you know, like holding both of those together, and like Friendship Commander, you know, you're gonna come up with some interesting material based off that music.
Yeah, and just because Joe's such a beast on the drums, like it's insane.
Right.
So yeah, we just like, and for us, it's just maybe it's naivete or something like that. It's just like we've never let trying to fit into certain thing or always needing to write this certain thing influence a song. Like sometimes, so the Welcome to Nashville riff started as a folky riff that I was writing for a friend in Berlin, and then I was playing it in front of Elliot, and it turned into that like very Angus Young inspired thing, and just like whatever the song wants to be, and we don't ever fight that really. Like, oh, that sounds good, that's what it feels like it should be, and don't ever try to like, oh, it needs to be this because this is what I want it to be. It's like, no, that's what it wants to be.
I'm guessing though that people in the audience, depending with which band you're playing, will react differently to, you know, you mentioning Townes Van Zandt and Steve Earle in the song. I guess some will be more excited than others. I would imagine.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, usually, and also like when we do play live, we'll have a lot of humor of like jokes that we've rehearsed, and usually a line I'll say is like, "Don't worry, folks, we don't know what fucking genre we are either, so just like go with it."
Yeah, and you know, it's like we have the rock jokes, we have the country jokes, we have the in-between jokes, and the humor kind of lets people relax too.
Sure.
I think especially nowadays, for some reason, like you either have the fan that's super excited to have found you because you're an alien and they're excited by alien sounds, or you have the fan, you know, that wants it all to fit into what they already know. And that can be a challenge. And I would argue that like we have songs for them too that can kind of warm them up. You know, like it depends on where we are, right? And like what kind of feel we get at the venue. But we have songs that will sort of relax our country fans and be like, hey, we'll play you a Waylon Jennings song, like don't worry. Or we'll play you a Statler Brothers cover. Like it's going to be okay. And once we get them with that, we'll kind of like ease them into one of our songs, like Atlanta Dog, which is going to be on the album, which is a more, a country rock mix for sure. It goes into both territories. And once we get them warmed up with that one, okay, maybe we'll hit you with one of our actual rock songs. And so by the time, they've had time even in their ears to warm up to the sound, they're ready for it, and especially, yeah. So that's kind of like our sales pitch.
Yeah. Fortunately, we're not playing, here's a Submit Hub burn. We're not playing this like Submit Hub, what do you call them? The like the guys who choose you things who like will give like really
right.
really mean reviews on things like that. I've listened to your song for like a minute. I could be like, man, if you were at our show and listened to the whole 45-minute set, you would get what this is.
You would understand what we're doing.
Instead of writing those mean 30 words.
Chris is forever rude. Chris takes everything personally.
Oh, I do. Especially,
Well,
it's just like, because
I
that's what you're saying, like trying to fit certain, like with the audience people, I almost feel bad, like, because those audience people get to hear the whole thing, like hear it all in context. Whereas like you will get those Submit Hub reviews where it's like, oh, it seems like it needs to be this, and you should have done this way. Why did you mix it this way, or why did you do that?
That's
it's like,
so complicated.
yeah.
Like we're, we just live in a world now, especially with audience and music. Like everyone wants that single, So we're very single-minded in that way. Like, I think everything gets taken out of context today. That's all I'll say.
No, it's almost. It's a thing of technology. Everything gets shorter and shorter. It's like, I remember I tried to watch the whole Handel's Messiah once, and like, oh my gosh, my 21st century mind can't perceive this 18th century opera because it's really long and I'm not understanding the motions. And now, but we were experiencing young people not being able to understand like the beauty of like listening to Dark Side of the Moon. Or like one of my favorite things to do was like listening to Tool albums, which are like massive 82-minute long journeys.
Right.
It's a sad loss sometimes of thinking of like, for all of its imperfections that the music industry was when the album was king, like the cool thing about the vinyl was that you were on a journey. Like it wasn't just that one single.
You could put in some weird songs, like you could put in some really crazy stuff, and if someone's listening to your whole album, they'll be like, what? Like, and this happened a lot in like classic rock. Like the Who could throw in like Behind Blue Eyes, and you're like, wow, this is like a sad song, like with all your other Who business or whatever. And like nowadays, with that single-minded nature, that gets flushed out quite often because it's just not like, on track or whatever.
And I'm guilty of it too. Like I just go on Spotify and I'm just like, oh, I'm going to listen to this song now. Or I'm going to make this playlist and I'm just going to jump around. But like in that world, you don't get to experience the wonderfulness of a secret track. Like on Dookie, when Green Day goes into the secret track, like, oh, this is amazing. Or like I remember, this is a story of my brother telling me the first time he listened to Undertow by Tool, and like this, there's like he fell asleep and then like 10 minutes of silence, and then all of a sudden it's just like life feeds on life, and there's sheep noises and things like that.
What?
And cattle being, yeah, it's crazy, but that's like an awesome, cool experience.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there are bands now that perform, or that there was a sort of fashion where they would perform the whole album live. I guess in recent years, it was sort of a classic album.
Yeah, totally. It's just, and the cool thing, like we have with Romanus, is that he turns the vinyls into art pieces. He will put really cool materials in them, whether it's like LED lights or honey or all these different things, are just really cool paint designs, so people can still get that sense of like, this is an art piece. And like, and I remember just buying CDs, looking at the artwork was always cool. Like just like looking at your CD collection, just like strolling through it. So that is one thing you lose in the modern era, that maybe we'll figure out something new.
It's a balance. I think vinyl's popular now because of that, because people miss that unique content. So
right. And I'm actually wondering, I know I've kept you quite a bit, but just in ending, I guess you were mentioning an album, and obviously this is a single that I'm guessing leads up to something. So my two-part question is, first, where will this fit? Will there be an album? And how does that work with the label that you're on, maybe as opposed to releasing it as a DIY project or something like that?
Well, the hilarious thing that I always think about the single "Welcome to Cashville," like Elliot mentioned, it's usually our closer, the one we end with, but we start the album with it. And we've tried to start sets with it, but I think it's just
weird.
like you got to build it up to that song. We need the energy to go into that song. It's like you got to warm up to it. You can't just go straight into it.
One day we'll be able to do it, but we've definitely got to pump ourselves up.
Yeah, we definitely. I mean, like I would definitely love to, like when things come back, or even if it's just on a live stream that we release, just do the whole album straight through. I think that would be really fun.
But yeah, it's the Welcome to Cashville. So the album that we're releasing, it's coming out May 28th. It's called Cashville. So it's it's appropriate that the first song's Welcome to Cashville.
Yeah.
And we kind of like think of it as our manifesto before we like begin the rest of the album. It's like, here's how we stand. Okay, let's go.
Yeah. And like, just, we're not going to hold back. We're going to like, this is everything. This is just our truthful selves. And like, sometimes we're going to feel very rocky. Sometimes we're going to feel very country. Sometimes we're going to feel jovial. Sometimes we're going to feel sarcastic or melancholy. And it's just everything. You guys are coming with us. And we're super excited to release this. This is going to actually be our first album that we're releasing. And it's through Romanus Records. And so like even with any, I had to learn it, and it's an interesting thing, like explaining to like some of like my girlfriend or something, like who doesn't really pay attention to like in industry things. Like it's an indie label, so we are still doing like pretty much everything ourselves. The thing with Romanus Records is it's the vinyl that he releases for us.
It's like a small time distribution deal.
Yeah, it's a distribution deal.
Works out better when we're touring, because then we can actually sell it in person.
Yeah.
Which always, we'll always do better. But yeah, he splits the investment costs to actually have the vinyl made with us, which is amazing, and is honestly a really unique deal. For like our level bands, lower tier bands, who don't have as much extra money, to throw in, that really helps. And and he's got a really cool connection with a Kentucky, what do you call it?
Vinyl factory.
Vinyl factory.
Yeah. Oh, nice.
And Romanus Records. They're unique. They're independent still, and we are too, and we get to keep those identities, but still use his platform, to spread our message.
Yeah, it's like a subcontracting thing. And like I like, if any new artists are listening, like if somebody does offer you a full label deal these days, and if you're just starting and you're not like Billie Eilish, but even Billie Eilish had like a huge infrastructure, don't sign that deal. Don't do that. Like you're probably not going to go anywhere with it. Probably, like, it is better to be controlling things, and like if that's really important to you, of like the
other side of that is that no label will give you that deal.
Yeah, nobody will do it
unless you already have like 3 million streams. Unless you've essentially already made money that they can rely on. So it's potatoes.
Yeah.
Like,
the music industry really hasn't figured out, with the fall of vinyl and CDs as like the main money,
the fall of album
purchase
sales.
The fall of album sales, they're not going to invest something that they can't make money back from. Like a record deal, I never realized, it's just a loan. Like you have to pay that money back,
and it's a really crappy loan.
And
historically it's had super high interest rates, so it's a bad deal. And
that's why you have so many artists who were established struggling so much now, and like why you see things like Metallica's battle with Napster, and like Tom Petty going after Sam Smith and things like that, and taking money from smaller artists. I love Tom Petty, but I still very much disagree with like that whole situation of like suing him over a couple of notes. But
Yeah.
that's just like the reality, because like, as I said, a record deals is not really what, I mean, it's helpful if you want to do that and get that on that big thing for a short period of time. Like, you guys should
You
watch
can actually make money.
if you, yeah.
I mean, like, my 2 cents will be like, that's one of the reasons also why you see these huge artists from the past, like Neil Young, going on these big tours all of a sudden, before pandemic, and Paul Simon, because they're losing out all the money that they previously could rely on as like steady income. They literally have, I mean, I'm sure they want to tour too. I think Neil Young actually just loves touring. However, they need that money. They now, everyone, no matter how big you are, you rely heavily on your tour money.
Because we actually make money.
Sales.
Yeah.
Right. But I guess the one thing that you just you cannot replace is talent. And in closing, I want to ask you this, and sorry if I'm stereotyping again, because I think I did this across the interview.
You are very talented people.
But yeah, I'm actually wondering, and I always wondered this, and sorry if I'm getting this completely wrong, but it seems that people in Nashville and Texas, you mentioned, especially when it comes to singing and guitar playing, it just seems to come very natural, while a lot of people like myself spend years just trying to learn a few chords. And how does that happen, I guess, if there is an answer to that?
I think it's an illusion.
Yeah. She's from California. Let's just break that up.
It's wow.
I'm saying you're talented.
Texans hate Californians.
And Californians hate everyone.
We've recently, like, a large amount of Californians have actually moved to Texas. So that's why that exists. But
darn you, Elon Musk and Joe Rogan.
Hey, a lot of goodness to come out of California. I always tell Chris, don't worry, California is going to be like its own country in 20 years.
Texas already thinks it's its own country.
Yeah, I know. I would say it's all an illusion. Most of, especially like us touring artists, would say we fail all the time and continue to, and look forward to the next moment of failure, and that is just the process of being an artist, and it sucks, and it's going to happen when you least want it to. It's going to happen. I think if anything, we've gotten better at embracing it, and I say this trying to say this in a positive light. Like, we've gotten where we are because we've gotten more comfortable with failing, and getting up again and trying it over again. And I think that's one of the great things about being able to tour, is you basically get this huge canvas to experiment. And
if you screw up one night, you're going somewhere else the next night.
Yeah,
so you get to try it all over again.
And the really great part about being at our level and not having a bunch of contracts where we have to have a certain amount of ticket sales or whatever, because those do totally exist, is that, not every show is your make it or break it show. Not every performance is like do or die. And it can feel like that at first when you start out touring or you start out performing, really, like, oh my gosh, this one show in front of my 20 friends means the world. And, I think it's always important to just take it with a grain of salt. Like, you're nervous because you care about it and you want it to sound great and you've put so much effort into it. And also, it's all a big journey. It's all a big process. And the more that we can all get comfortable with putting ourselves out there and doing it, even if we think we're going to mess it up, especially with our new songs, Chris and I always look at each other like, good luck, hope this turns out. And simply, I would say it's a numbers game. It's like Malcolm Gladwell wrote that book, Outliers. He said like 10,000 hours is what makes an expert. And like 10,000 hours is what made the Beatles so amazing, because they got to go play in Hamburg and they were playing to nobody and everybody in these bars in Hamburg for hours just to make some money. And it was not precious. That was the whole point. It was something that they enjoyed doing, but there wasn't that pressure to have to be anything, specific. They just had to entertain. So they got all these hours under their belt of just doing it, of doing the motions and getting comfortable with it. And I think, the only other thing I'd say is that, like, it's a process, and especially speaking to this year where we've all been off the road, you know, we all have to get back into it. And I guarantee you all the, you know, mid-level bigger bands, that's exactly what they're doing right now. They're getting back into the rehearsal rooms. They're, you know, releasing all their yayas. They're like getting it all out and practicing, because it's a muscle, you know, it's a muscle being able to do all this. It's a muscle being able to drum and sing at the same time. And no one can just jump into it. You know, no one can just stand up and do it. You know, even Bruce Springsteen's going to have to go rehearse, you know, before his shows. And it's the nature of the beast, you know.
You can literally go, there's like recordings of Bruce Springsteen's where you can hear him going through different song lyrics of just singing it over different songs and things like that, just working things out. And like, if you go through any artist that catalog, like, you know, like if you're just listening to Bruce Springsteen's like greatest hits, you're not realizing that he's written some shitty songs too. You have to, like, I think that's like the rule. You have to write like 100 really bad songs to get like 10 good ones. And even like the Malcolm Gladwell thing, that 10,000 hours is an average. Like it might take more. It's just that willingness. And like Dave Grohl put it so well in his Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's acceptance speech. Like, thank you guys for letting me suck and for long enough to where I could actually get good. And it's just, it's like that war of attrition. That like, if you have enough passion, and that's how you know if you're an artist, I think, is like, if you are willing, if you can't do anything else or see yourself doing anything else, and if you're willing to go through that, that's the telltale sign. And
also not to glorify it, you know, there's this mythos that it's this place to get to, you know, there's this mythos that it's a destination, that it's like, oh, I'm finally going to get to this point where I'm super confident about everything I write and everything I do, and I feel so good getting up on stage. You know, it's that doesn't exist. You know, no matter what level you're on, people, you know, you're going to have nerves, and that's a good thing, you know, and like that's part of it. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of glorification of being an artist and being a musician and just getting up on stage and doing it. And, you know, for those big artists, that's true. Joan Jett does walk out of her limousine onto the stage and start her set. There are artists who do that, you know, but I would bet that she had been warming up before that, you know, before she got in the car or whatever. So
right.
It's a mythos. It's a mythos. This like go and be excellent all of a sudden.
And I think to speak to like the European, I think what you were saying is like, oh, I only play a few chords and things like that, and I can't really get to that level or something like that. Like, I think it just goes back to like just whatever makes your soul sing, to be corny about it. Like whatever is, you know, that's excited. Not like I would always get bummed out when I would see, like, not to rag on the Germans much, but like when you did see a rock band, they were basically just trying to be the Black Keys.
Or like a classic rock sound,
like I know everybody focuses on those 10 years in German history. But like there's a whole cool culture of that country, and there's a whole cool history and culture behind every country. And like you have like
stuff like krautrock gets such a bad reputation, and it's so cool and unique, you know. And
like make it individual to that, like take your influences and take your personal experiences and make it into art. And like you have like thinking of Ukraine, like Gogol Bordello, like he made a really awesome art piece of his band and things like that. That's so fun to watch. I got to see Gogol Bordello open for Tool once, and I was like, this is the most amazing.
Oh, wow.
It was so cool.
That's awesome. I mean, you know, like closing statements, and it sounds so cheesy, but like it really does always behoove the artist to be themselves, no matter what that looks like. And ultimately our cowpunk version, you know, of Volk is actually us being ourselves, you know, is actually our most authentic self.
This is literally just us being ourselves. And you know,
it's always the best path to follow, I think, ultimately.
Folks, thanks so much for allowing me to take the interview and for your time. And I'm really excited about the album. If I got it right, that's out in May.
Yes, May 28th. Oh yeah.
Brilliant. I'll be looking forward to that. And thank you so much. Thanks again.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate you.
You too.
Talk to you soon.
Bye. Thanks. Bye.